lot of women will respond really well to like a microdose of testosterone as well. As a matter of fact, if you apply just like a small dose of testosterone cream back to sex, prior to sex on the clitoris for women, like you can have amazing orgasms. That or nitroglycerin cream is another one that works
Oh,
really,
yeah, we
really well
talked
for
about that
that.
last time.
Do we? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the NOS cream.
Taylor's
But
Googling both for
yeah,
his girlfriend.
yeah, but, for the hormones, you need to test, and you need to test frequently if you are using any type of replacement therapy, like, say, progesterone, or if you're
Meaning, like, you don't just get one test, do it, and then stay with that. Like, you gotta go back after and see what the
right, you wanna monitor your levels, so the hormones that you're taking aren't, say, being over aromatized to produce excess amounts of estrogen. In males, sometimes who are taking testosterone, you see an impact on things like hematocrit and red blood cells that could cause those to become too high. Occasionally, you'll see an increase in prostate-specific antigen. Sometimes you'll see, increase in estrogen again in men, or an over conversion of the testosterone to something called DHT, which can cause things like hair loss or acne. So you do want to test frequently
how
if
frequently
you
is
are on
frequently?
hormones. I would say a quarterly basis is pretty good. And there are different ways to test hormones, but I think the best way is urine, because a urine measurement. There's a great test called a Dutch test, a dried urine
Yep.
test for hormones, and that one does a really good job at identifying not just your hormone levels as they fluctuate throughout the day, because you got to pee on a little stick like 5 times during the day to do the test. So you're not just, some people get a blood test for, say, cortisol, and it'll be, let's say, kind of low. But then if you look at it throughout the rest of the day, after that one single snapshot from the blood, it's actually pretty normal. And so the Dutch test allows you to see how the hormones are fluctuating throughout the day rather than getting you a one time snapshot. And they also show you some of what are called the metabolites of the hormones, which is interesting. So you talked about something like thyroid, Lauren. Well, what you can see is if you're low thyroid, sometimes you don't break down cortisol that well, right? And so you might see someone who has rampantly high levels of cortisol get a test, but if you do the dried urine test, you may see that what's actually occurring is that cortisol metabolites are low because the cortisol isn't getting broken down properly. So it's not an issue, say, of let's say like you being way too stressed out, or you having too much coffee in the morning. You can dig a little deeper if you see a high amount of cortisol metabolites, or a low amount of cortisol metabolites, and it might be an indication that your thyroid is not functioning properly, right? And so the Dutch test can give you a lot of clues, and if you work with a good functional medicine doc who can look at the results and analyze them for you and then make little tweaks as you go, that can pair really well with some type of hormone replacement therapy.
What's if someone has low thyroid like I was diagnosed with and then they get that thyroid balanced, what are the differences of how I'm gonna feel?
Well, first, I mean, if you test low thyroid, you don't want to just have a doctor look at, say, what a lot of doctors will look at is TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. A thyroid stimulating hormone is high. Some docs will say if it's above 4. I think above 2 is an even better measurement of whether or not it's excessively high. That is an indication that your brain is trying to get your thyroid to produce more thyroid hormone because it's not, or because the thyroid hormone isn't getting converted properly into its active form, into what's called T3. And the problem is if you're just getting TSH, it doesn't really tell you why you don't have enough thyroid hormone, right? Like it could be that you test and your TSH is high, but then if you do a more advanced thyroid panel that's looking at T3, T4, free T3, free T4, thyroid antibodies, and reverse T3, all of a sudden you have all the clues that you need. Like let's say that you've got high TSH and poor thyroid function, but your thyroid antibodies test high. Well, that's indicative that there's some sort of immune system reaction that's suppressing thyroid function. And in many cases, those are things like wheat, soy, dairy, problematic allergenic foods, or foods that people are often intolerant to. And so the approach there would be to use a more of kind of like an autoimmune approach to adjusting thyroid. Sometimes you'll see that thyroid antibodies are just fine, and this is something you'll see a lot of times in like the ketogenic community, especially like the ketogenic active athlete community. They're not getting enough glucose to support the conversion of inactive thyroid hormone, T4, into T3. And so with somebody like that, you might say, okay, we just got to eat a little bit more carbohydrate at night. Maybe don't train quite as hard if you are going to do a low carb diet. And so, you always have to step back and look at why thyroid is low.